Welcome to the Author Your Life podcast, where you can write a new script for your life and become the hero of your story. I'm your host, David McRae. You are the author of your life. Let's get started.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Before we launch into the podcast, I'd like to tell you about my book, Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story. This is a book for people who are at a crossroads in life and want to make a fresh start. Judging by the fact that you're listening to this podcast, I suspect that you may well be one of those people. This book is going to help you to change your narrative and rewrite the scripts in life that are holding you back. This book covers the latest science and research showing you how to become the person you want to be and live the life that you want to live. I'd like to invite you to get this book not only because I feel it's a great book that's going to help you, but also it's going to support the podcast as well. I love podcasts, but sometimes all of those ads that you get can be really irrelevant and annoying when you just want to listen to a good piece of training or a good interview. So I therefore made the decision with my podcasts that number one, I wanted my podcast to be free so that everyone could listen to it. And number two, that I wasn't going to fund it through all these annoying and irrelevant adverts and commercials. Therefore, if you want to support the podcast and support all the things that I put out there for free, whether it be here on the podcast, my YouTube channel, other areas on social media, then buying a book is going to enable and help that process. So this is what we call a win-win scenario. By buying the book, you help to support my work and all the free stuff that I put out there, and you also get a really transformational book that's going to help you make those changes that you really want in your life. So if you feel you're someone who's at that crossroads in life, you're looking for a new direction, you're looking for a fresh start, then make sure you get this book. Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story is available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Whatever your preferred medium, it's there for you to go get right now. Hello, story changers, and welcome back to another episode of the Author Your Life podcast. In today's episode, we have David Wood. David says, when you're 10,000 feet above the Himalayas, hanging from a piece of cloth, you see life differently. David has been described as playful and deep, and believes life is the best game there is. The question is, are you playing for real? David is a former consulting actuary to Fortune 100 companies, including Sony Music, Proctor Gamble, and Exxon. David left his cushy Park Avenue job 20 years ago to explore both the outer world and his own inner world. Along the way, he's coached thousands of hours in dozens of countries around the globe and is the author of Get Paid for Who You Are, with a foreword by Jack Canfield. He was nominated to the Transformational Leadership Council, alongside such thought leaders as Don Miguel Ruiz, John Gray, Marci Shimoff, and Vishen Lakhiani. David built the world's largest coaching business, becoming number one on Google for life coaching and serving an audience of 150,000 coaches around the globe. He now coaches high-performing entrepreneurs, executives, and leaders to play the best game they possibly can, deepening connection and living a regret-free life. How? By setting life-changing goals, taking laser-focused action, and increasing their levels of truth, daring, and caring in both life and work. David combines the left brain of a consulting actuary with the right brain of a personal growth junkie, making him the ideal bridge between the worlds of amazing results and deep connections. David is actually offering a free assessment for you. It takes just 1 minute to see if you are playing for real. And unsurprisingly, you can find this link at www.playforreal.life to see if you are living this life of truth, daring, and caring that you're going to find out so much more about in this interview. We covered a lot in this conversation, and we went to some places that I've never been before on the Author Your Life podcast so far, and I think you're really going to be illuminated by some of the topics that we talk about, and hopefully inspired along the way as well. To give you just a flavor of some of what we've talked about in this interview, you're going to learn how to bring together the left and right brain, David's number one coaching question, what working with prison inmates has taught David about luck, the difference between being authentic and telling the truth. You're going to learn all this and so much more in this interview. So without any further preamble, allow me to introduce you to David Wood. David Wood, welcome to the Author Your Life podcast.
Thanks.
So this is the first time I've had another David on the podcast. So I know this is going to be good. Us Davids put high standards on things, and you're an individual who is doing some very interesting work. And I'm looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into this during our time together. But first of all, the way that I like to start with everyone who comes on the podcast is I want to find out a little bit about your journey and about your story. What has gotten you into doing the work that you're doing now, David?
Well, I started life as a consulting actuary to Fortune 100 companies on Park Avenue. I figured that was the way to go because I was really good at math and it paid really well. And I found something was missing. I didn't realize that when I was a kid, I had some trauma. I mean, most of us have had something happen to us, but I watched my 5-year-old sister die in a traffic accident when I was 7. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had shut down emotionally. So I developed my left brain and became very good at systems and creating results and making things happen in time and space. And I still love that. But I embarked on a journey at the age of 23 of reclaiming my emotions. How do I connect with other humans? Because, yeah, results are great and money's great, but if we don't have that deep connection, then we're really lost, and I think we are going to have regrets when it comes to deathbed time. So here I am on Park Avenue. I quit my job. I go and do some personal development programs. I get so excited at the transformation that's happening. Because initially I was cynical. These people had name tags. They smiled too much. I'm like, I'm just going to get in and get out. I'm not going to do too much of this self-help mumbo jumbo. But I saw the transformation that was happening in a matter of days in people's lives, and I couldn't help but coach them. When people were getting stuck, I'd say, well, the trainer said this, or the teacher said this, or have you thought about this? And I got such a high from seeing one woman's life change overnight that I thought, I wonder if I could do this. So I left my job, my cushy job, working with people and corporations on numbers. And I started working with people and businesses and corporations on people. So I consider myself now the bridge between left brain, make it happen, get things done, get results, and the right brain, let's connect with humans so that we have a full and rich life that isn't just about the results.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Something I've become really interested in recently is something that Aristotle talked about, and he talked about there's this virtuous mean. And when we look at all the virtues, all the things that we hold in high regards, they're usually the middle point between two extremes. So if you look at something like courage, if you don't have enough courage, then you have cowardness, you have timidness, you'll never ever take any action. But if you have too much courage, you have recklessness, you'll run into a burning building with no chance of ever getting out again. So you need that point in the middle between cowardness and recklessness, and that's what we call courage. And I think that's what you're doing with left brain and right brain. We can't be too much towards one side or the other. We need to bring both together and bring both into balance. So that I really like that you have that approach.
I like that you brought that up because three of the pillars of Play for Real is my brand, and the three values that I'm most excited about are truth, daring, and caring. And I didn't have caring in the beginning of my life. I learned a lot of truth, and I learned a lot of daring. So I had this courage piece that you and Aristotle speak of, but I didn't have the balance. And it took my body whacking me over the head. I had to go into deep depression and anxiety to learn that I actually have physical limits. I did not know that. I was the spiritual warrior. If I'm scared of heights, I'll go and paraglide solo over the Himalayas at 10,000 feet. If I'm scared of abandonment, I will explore open relationships and fall in love with someone who has another partner. And that's great. I still think that people should find their edges and be daring, but you do need to temper it with the caring. You need to know when your body and your system is like, hey, that's too much. We need to do a bit of nurturing now. So yeah, that balance is critical.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there was a key inflection point or a key decision point where you realized that you had to make this shift? I know that you gave a broad oversight of you're working in corporate and you're doing very, very well with the left brain stuff, the numbers and the analytics and the results. But do you think there was a moment or an event that triggered that shift and you recognizing that you needed to find that balance?
I don't remember it as like a moment in time. There was a moment in time because I was quite cynical. I just thought that self-help people were just out to get my money, and that I was very cynical. And a moment happened during the second course that I did when I overheard one of the teachers speaking to another one. He was whispering. And one of the students was up on stage declaring a new possibility for their life. And everyone in the room was moved. And I overheard the teacher say to the other one, "It just makes you cry, doesn't it?" And that was a revelation for me. I was like, wait, these people actually care. They've devoted their life to transformation. Yeah, they want to be paid for it, but that's not their main driver. And I didn't even know that that existed. So that cracked my cynicism open. And it was a series of points where, like the moment when I coached a woman sitting in a car after the course, and she told me that her husband had an affair 10 years earlier, and she'd been holding that over him as a way to control him for 10 years. As we explored a little further, it turned out someone else had an affair 10 years earlier. She did, but
Wow.
she hadn't told him that. hadn't told him that. So in the conversation, she got to see the possibility of coming clean with him and risking her marriage for the possibility of greater connection and love. And she went home, she did come clean, and she came back to the course on the Monday and she reported that they felt like they were walking on air 6 feet above the ground the whole weekend. They were so much in love. And so that was a moment when I realized I want this. I want this kind of transformation for myself, and I want it for everybody else. I didn't know yet that I could do it as a paying career. That was another moment when someone gave me a business card and said, "Oh yeah, if you need a coach, this guy's doing it professionally." I'm like, wait, what? This was back in 1997. And I got excited about that idea, but it was another year before I met someone else who was doing it, and I hired him and I said, "You will be my first coach. Show me how to do it." And I got my first session with him, and then I had my first session with my practice client. And then she said, "Well, what's happening next week?" I said, "Wait and see," because I didn't know. I hadn't had my second session with my coach, so I didn't really know what you do in a second session. That's how I got started in the career of coaching.
So tell us a little bit more how this has developed and where you found your specialty and your point of focus. You mentioned right at the beginning that your purpose and your mission is to help people live a regret-free life. Where did that language and where did that clarity come from for you?
Well, yeah, I'll give you the current version. There's a historic point that's useful to know, that as I was coaching and as I was getting successful, and people were saying, how do you do this? Like, how do you have this lifestyle? I started working with more and more coaches. That was a natural progression. So I became the coach's coach, got to #1 on Google for life coaching. And I think it may have been the world's largest coaching business at some point. But what I realized a few years ago was that I was done with that. I was burned out. I'd said everything I had to say to coaches about building a coaching practice, and I missed that real transformation. I'm happy to talk about business and branding and marketing and all of that, but let's also have the conversation. I've got a client who wants to connect with his son more. He's got a 16-year-old son. Kid doesn't seem very interested in what the dad has to say. I love that stuff. Roll up my sleeves, like, right, that's a great challenge. So I've been wanting to have more of that and less of what I'd already been doing. So I retired in Bali, semi-retired. I'm surrounded by rice paddies, and I've got staff who are even cleaning my scooter, buying all my food for me. Everything was taken care of, but I was bored. And I felt like I was dying slowly. I wasn't engaged with the world. I had enough money to cover my expenses. And that's not really always a good place to be. I would wish on someone passion over money. And what happened was I left Bali. Circumstances required that I leave Bali. I had to leave my safe nest. I'm like, what am I going to do with my life again? And a good friend of mine said, you're a great coach. And I realized I'm happiest when I'm coaching and training. So I had to go back to coaching. But if it wasn't going to be coaches, who do I want to work with? And it took a year for me to start to uncover my values and realize that truth, daring, and caring, and then ultimately connection are the 4 most important things that I care about. And I believe I love that your podcast is called Author Your Life, because that's the message I'm trying to get across. We're kind of like rats in a maze. And that's not bad. It could be a great maze. We've got our patterns. We go to work. We pay our expenses. We've got our addictions, sugar, alcohol, TV, whatever it is. And that's fine. But as humans, we have the ability to step outside the maze and go, wait a minute. Let me at first see the maze. Is this a maze that I want to be in? And what else is possible in my life? Not everybody is authoring their own life. They're on autopilot. Now, if you love your life, great. No need to do any authoring. But I want people to have a wake-up call before they have a near-death experience, before they actually die, and actually go, if I was on my deathbed tonight, could I look back over my life and say I gave it everything? Or would I have regrets? So that became my target market. Now, of course, you got to pick a demographic. So I picked high performers because I identify as a high performer, and I like working with people who are just making stuff happen in the world. They're engaged. If they're struggling, it's usually only in one area. They're not struggling at all. They're successful in many areas of life. So I'm like, I want to work with high performers, executives, entrepreneurs. They're leading in some capacity. And I'm going to work with them. This was a decision I made a year ago. Work with them on living a regret-free life by upping their levels of truth, daring, and caring. And I'm thrilled with the clients that are showing up. I just started working with one client who she's successful. She's got her own radio show. Money's handled, but she wants to make a bigger impact on animal welfare. So now we're looking at how to triple her business so that she can empower animal shelters that just don't have the funds to save animals. And I've got a puppy sitting right here, taking a little snooze while we talk. So I'm thrilled that I get paid to help someone save animals.
Yeah.
I just can't even see at this stage how it gets much better than that. Did that answer your question about
Yeah.
and the niche and how I came to that? Oh,
Yeah.
wait,
There's
there's
more.
more. Well, I thought this is who I'm going to help. But then I've been hearing about people doing work in prisons for a number of years, and I'd always felt drawn to it in some way. And I had an opportunity to go to a prison a couple of months ago and assist in teaching them in authentic relating skills, teaching them how to connect deeply with another human and how to manage their emotions and share their emotions so that they can be deeply related, so they can get a job when they get on the outside, so that they can maintain a job, so they can handle their emotions and not have to lash out. So it seems that now, and not by design, but now I'm working with high performers and what I'll call low performers, at least for now, going into prisons and doing this work. So I feel thrilled that I get to kind of cover quite a broad range.
Yeah. The prison stuff is super interesting, and I'll come back to that in a little later. I'd like to really sort of dig into that and find out more. There was something you were saying kind of right at the beginning of your tale and how you got into this. You're talking about being in Bali and you felt that you were tired, and the phrase that you used was dying a slow death. And I think there's a lot of people listening who can relate to that. They're in a job that's decent, a career that's good, they get well paid, they're maybe actually quite good at what they do, but it's just not their thing. It's good, but it's not good enough.
Right.
For anyone who resonates with that feeling and that experience that you had, what would you be saying to them in terms of finding fresh clarity for yourself, finding new direction and where you can go in your career and the work that you're doing? Any advice or techniques that you used at the time to make that switch for yourself?
Yeah. I say yes because I trust that when I get to that answer, it will come. I like to not prepare for interviews because I never know what's gonna come. So I say yes, and I know something will come. But first, I want to double click on what you said. The dying a slow death. That's okay. Fine. The word "fine" is what you're talking about. Yeah, it's fine. My life's fine. My job's fine. That can be wonderful. You might dig into that. I'm a big fan of Byron Katie, loving what is. You might find ways to love it, and then it's not fine anymore. But what if we don't get reincarnated? I don't know if it's going to happen. What if we don't get reincarnated? What if this is our one life? Wouldn't you want it to be more than fine?
Yeah.
So I had a job on Park Avenue. I'm going to Sony Music and Chanel and Ford. Like, wow. And I realized that there was more available for me. So I went and followed that. And then in Bali, I didn't even know it. I just was slowly dying. I wasn't aged. Addiction started to manifest like video games. And for me, when I'm addicted to alcohol, it's like 1 or 2 drinks a day, which is a lot, I think, for any human. And so these addictions were manifesting and I just wasn't engaged in life. So question is what can you do if you feel like there's more? Well, the simplest, most direct is work with a coach. Work with a coach. And a coach will ask you the questions that you may not have asked yourself. And also, you might find different answers when someone else is asking you with their full attention on you versus you just trying to think about stuff. That's one way. I'm a fan of journaling, stream of consciousness. You cannot stop writing, even if it's to say, I don't know what to write. I want more in my life, but I don't know what it is. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know what to write. Maybe something in musical theater would be, oh, that's just stupid. Blah, blah, blah. Just keep on writing. That's one way to do it. There are books. One that comes to mind, and I will say up front that I haven't read it. It's one of those books I wish I'd read. I love the authors. Janet and Chris Atwood wrote a book called The Passion Test. And I haven't read that book, but I love that there's a book that helps you dive into, like, what would I love? What am I passionate about? How do I find my passion? Now, some people work really well with that. They're self-directed enough that they could read a book and make a life change based on that. There aren't that many people who can do that. I'm not even sure if I'm one of them. So going and doing getting a coach is something where your resistance won't be able to survive if you have a good coach. Whatever's keeping you in the rat maze won't be able to survive the presence of a good coach. That's what you want, that they can dissolve that. Also, you can go and do a program that'll just shake you up. Landmark Education has they're the people with the name tags and they smile too much, and they are going to ask you to get all your friends to come and do the program. I'll tell you that up front, but don't let that stop you. In 3 days, they can rock your world and crack you open to a new way of thinking. And who knows what you'll discover in those 3 days.
You were talking about breaking through the resistance with a coach, and they can ask you questions that will create different answers, even if you ask questions yourself. Are there any questions that you've been asked on the receiving end of coaching, or that you love to ask when you're coaching someone, that just seems to create some really powerful breakthrough answers?
Well, my favorite, which seems like a cheat, but it's so good, is if you were coaching yourself right now, what would you say? That should be like the golden coaching question, because I've got lots of ideas, right? You can hear, I could talk nonstop. It's possible. But I'm not the expert on you. I know nothing about you. I'm an expert on coaching. So if I can help, firstly, you might come up with a better answer than I would. Secondly, it's probably going to be better because it's for you. And if you come up with it, you're more likely to act on it and to care about it. Byron Katie is maybe the best teacher I've ever found, because she really hesitates to actually give any answers. Because I think if any teachers are like me, they like having the answer. I'm that kid in school that likes having the answer. And sure, people pay me well to have great answers. But Katie's a great example of just bringing out, like, you come to your own answer. What do you think is the best way to find your next career? What would be a great opening? And then as I say it, more ideas are coming. Who are your 5 best friends? Go and interview them and ask them what they think you could be doing with your life. Go and ask your partner, ask your kids, ask your parents, and listen in a way you never have. I mean, that's, when I said the answer will come, there's always something that comes. But if you generate it, that's most powerful.
Mm-hmm. So let's fast forward back to the low performers and working in the prison system. What differences have you noticed in the way that you have to approach someone who's in prison compared to someone you're working with on the outside? They might be a CEO, they might be a C-suite executive, they might be a very successful entrepreneur. How would you have to differ in those two extreme approaches?
Well, it's a very different environment, so it's hard to kind of compare apples and oranges. One, my clients pay me. That's really important. They put down a good chunk of change that ideally there's some sting to. They feel it. It's not going to break the bank, but it's an investment, so they're going to sit up and take notice. So they're already prepped to hear anything from me, and I have credibility in their eyes because of what I've done. In prison, they haven't paid me. Some of them are showing up just because they're going to get some days off their sentence. Some of them they can get 2 weeks off their sentence for showing up for 2 days. I'd take that deal.
Yeah.
24/7, right? Another difference is it's in groups. So I rarely get them one-on-one in a prison. Also, I haven't been in prison. So I'm very conscious that I don't have that cred, that I'm not a former convict. I can share with them about my sister. I can say, look, I haven't had what you've had, but my life hasn't been totally rosy. And I can share with them something that's quite a shocking tragedy. And I think that helps generate a bit of rapport, like, oh, well, he's been through some stuff too. Because they've been through, a lot of them have been abused physically, sexually, and then a lot of them have ended up turning to drugs, which makes sense to me. I'm actually just feeling some sadness right now. I'm reading a book called Just Mercy, and it's about how offenders are treated. And when I get in there and hear their stories about abuse, and then this woman said the first time I was introduced to cocaine, life got better. That makes so much sense to me. And then the way we treat them sometimes is quite harsh. But other than those differences, I don't know if there's a way that I need to treat a CEO differently to an offender, because I want their lives to be better. I want that. And so I think they know that that's where I'm coming from. And if it was the president or a former offender or a current convict, that's the answer I've got right now. And you've got me curious. I'm gonna see if I can notice going forward any other differences. Mm-hmm. But they're hungry too. They are so hungry and grateful, in my experience, the inmates, for tools that are going to help them get better. Plus, they've been handpicked. Like, we had 200 women apply for this last program. Only 20 were selected. So we kind of got the cream of the crop that were really interested. So I'll let you know when I get a group that doesn't seem so interested and they're a harder case.
Yeah.
But so far, all the inmates I've met have been surprisingly ready and open and willing to connect and be authentic.
Have you learned anything from the inmates?
Yeah, I've learned some humility. I've learned a bit about my own prejudice. I have looked down on them, and I'm sure I still do, and think that I'm better. I've learned that one of the differences between them and me, in some cases, is luck. I'm not kidding. Yeah. I've started, look, I'm into authenticity, so I'm going to reveal right now. I started thinking about my life and thinking about, I met one guy who got drunk, drove drunk, and hit and killed a sheriff. Now, he could have gotten 30 years. This is age 24. He got leniency and they sentenced him to like 10 years. He served 6. He made a very poor choice. Now, I wouldn't get hammered and get behind a wheel, but cannabis is legal here in Colorado. Very common to have an edible, have something small for a party, and feel like, oh, I feel good to drive home. Drive home. Now, what if someone runs into me, dies, and I'm over the THC limit, which I don't even know what that is? I could go to jail for 10 to 20 years. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
So it sobered me up. Pun not intended, but acknowledged. Yeah. It sobered me up. And I've thought back to my life. I've committed crimes. I don't always keep to the law. Some laws I broke because I didn't know better. One when I was a minor, I just didn't know better. But some I break because I don't agree with them. And I could go to jail if I was caught. Some of them I think, morally, I think I'm totally in the right. I'm not hurting anybody. There's a drug that I did the investigation. There's a book by 2 doctors saying it's really healthy for you if used responsibly. I think I can use it responsibly. The government doesn't. The government doesn't to state crime. So I use, this idea I'm better, we're all better than the inmates. You will just think back. Have you ever broken the law? And you probably think, oh, well, I wouldn't get jail time for that. Sometimes it doesn't go your way. Sometimes a judge wants to make an example of you. Another woman, she's 25, and my heart went out to her. She planned a robbery. Okay, now I wouldn't do that. That's not something I do. But she planned a robbery. They didn't follow the plan. They did another plan. She wasn't even there. Someone got shot and killed. So she's charged with felony murder. She's got 25 years for planning a robbery, and then not doing the robbery, but they did something else. So that's one thing I learned. And another thing I learned is if they can generate possibility, then I've got no bullshit excuses.
Yeah.
Because I still complain. I complain about fatigue, feeling tired. That's my main complaint. And as a woman, I said to her, in 6 months, you'll be free. And she said, I'm free now.
Oof. Nice.
And I got goosebumps running up my legs right now. Like, if she can generate that, and I know it's possible theoretically, but she did it. She can generate freedom and feel empowered in prison, then the CEOs I'm working with and you and me, we've got no bullshit excuses for not loving our life. Oh, the other thing is I get to confront my freedoms. In a new way, I get to enjoy living here on a creek. I can walk out and look at that creek anytime. I can eat when I want to eat. I can wear what I want to wear. I can have a puppy if I want to have a puppy. Yeah. Simple freedoms that these people don't have. I met one amazing woman. She's not eligible for parole. Ever. She's a mama bear. All the new inmates meet her first. She takes care of them. Whatever. Very empowering woman, powerful woman. I saw the list of when people's sentences are up. She does not have an end date. She's in for life. It's unlikely she'll ever be released. So I learned that freedom itself is an incredible privilege that I have and do take for granted every single day. And I tell you what, I'm a little more careful now. I was going to eat a quarter of a cannabis gummy, just a quarter yesterday, and then I wanted to go and get some food. It's like, there's just no need to do it. I got something in the fridge. So I'm taking my freedoms. I'm protecting it a little more now.
Yeah. So I'd like to bring the focus into these 3 words that you've kept on repeating: truth, daring, caring. And I think change always begins with ourselves, as Gandhi said. If you want to change the world, you have to change yourself first. For you, when you're trying to live to these principles every day, what are some of the things that you're doing, practices, routines, habits that allow you to be in that place and live to those principles on a day-to-day basis?
Really love that question. And I notice I'm really enjoying this conversation in a new way. There's a quality of your listening. It's a real quality of your listening that I'm enjoying.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for putting that public as well.
Yeah. And that would be one of the practices that I just demonstrated. Is that was an acknowledgement of something that was true for me. So I want to talk about truth as a practice. On this call, I revealed that I've broken the law. Yeah. I revealed that I still do. I didn't say specifically what, but that's the kind of thing that someone might not want to share publicly. And this is very public.
Yeah.
The test for me, when I catch myself editing, I'll even say out loud, I notice I'm editing,
Yeah.
which creates some context now so people understand, oh, I notice I'm editing. And this is a practice, and I've spent 20 years at it. I try and err on the side of sharing more than less. And so when I notice, oh, I'm a bit embarrassed about that, that's a flag. That's a clue to me. Oh, that's something I could share. Oh, I notice I don't want the person to know that about me. That's a clue that I could share. Oh, I notice I really want this call to go well. I notice that about myself. So firstly, a lot of people are not actually tracking that. I wasn't taught to track what's happening in my own body and my own mind. I don't even notice that stuff. But as I notice, oh, I'm nervous. For example, now I didn't feel nervous about this call, but if I'm going to go on stage, I could be terrified. So I might notice the terror, and instead of pretending it's not there, I might say something about it on stage. I think that's a wonderful practice that leads to a number of things. It leads to deeper connection with the people around you. I think it leads generally to greater trust. People trust you more. I think I have a high level of trust in my community and my friends. And it leads to something that I don't know if I've talked about in 20 interviews. I don't know if I've talked about this, but my covert agenda. I believe a lot of us don't like ourselves as much as we could. And it goes hand in hand with hiding. The more we can be willing to share, and you don't have to overnight start releasing massive skeletons to your partner, but the more we can head in that direction, and the more we can find that people surprise us with accepting us, I think the more we can like ourselves. I know it works for me. I like myself more and more and more as that deep, dark stuff that some of it I didn't know, and some of it I know, and I don't want people to know about. As I share it, I like myself more. So self-love is something I don't talk about because I wasn't raised touchy-feely. I was raised in a country town in Australia as a man. And so self-love, I didn't even understand it for years. I'm like, what are you talking about? You can't love yourself and you can't have a relationship with yourself. I was adamant about that until I caught myself saying really nasty things about myself one day. I noticed it. I was like, whoa, how long's that been going on? And I thought if I could say bad things about myself, I must be able to say nice things about myself. And that's when I realized this relationship with self is actually a thing. We all have one, and it may not be the best. And so that's a great place to look.
Well, David, I'd like to start rounding off the ideas and rounding off the things we've been talking about so far. I've got a few final questions to do so. And I say this to all my guests that just because these are the last few questions, don't feel that you need to give short, succinct answers. These might be the longest answers that you give. Very much depends on where you go with your line of thinking. And the first of these questions is, you mentioned how important it was to bring the right brain into your life. You talked about adding this extra word of caring. And I think if we look at the world around us, there's a whole lack of caring. There's people being really nasty and really hostile to each other. So for you, David, how do you think we can bring more caring into the world and ultimately bring some more love into the world?
There are questions that exist that are a really nice way to put attention on people. And they're not about the weather, and they're not about how many kids do you have. There are questions that will take us to a deeper place. And I think asking these questions of the people in your life, just to show some natural interest, tap into your own natural curiosity. Next time you're at the checkout, you can say, how's your day? That's a nice thing to say, but it's kind of gotten cliche and people don't actually listen to it. So what if you asked, one thing I like to ask is, if you could identify a favorite moment of your day so far, a highlight, what would it be? Or here's one if you really want to go for it. Can I ask you an unusual question? If you were to travel back in time and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give? Something like that really engages them. I think that's a wonderful way to show more caring. And I believe so much in this, and it's, even though I'm a coach, it's a bit hard for me to come up with those questions. So I created an app for it, and it's a free app. If you want to go and get it on iTunes or on for iPhone or Android, it's called Get Real, a game to go deeper. And you just scroll through, find a question you really want to ask. That's the key. You can't just pick the first question. It's got to be one you want to ask. And then, you can play that game with anybody. A restaurant, partner, kids. What a great way to engage with your kids, parents. So that's one thought about caring. And my other thought is that you kind of like, I'm a big believer in putting the oxygen mask on yourself first. So, I could say to people, go and care for others, be nice, go and volunteer, go and help out at a shelter, go and do some work at prisons. I could say that, but I'd rather see you, what's one thing that you could do daily to take care of you? It might be drinking twice as much water. Take that if you can't think of anything else. It might be getting an extra half hour's sleep. You go to bed a little bit earlier. It could be that you take a walk for 20 minutes and get out of the house. Or you pick for you. It might be a bubble bath. But one thing, if you were to be nice to you, as if you were being nice to someone else that you really cared about, I'd be interested in that.
You were talking right at the beginning of your story that how a lot of your early life was scripted by the experience of losing your sister, and a lot of scripts were set up in childhood that dictated who you were and how you lived for a long period of time. And I'm sure there's still some scripts going on that you haven't fully worked through and gotten to a point that you want them to be yet. I'd like you to think of a child in front of you, a very young child, no more than 5 years old. And you've got to give this child some advice, a life lesson. You want to tell them something that's going to help them throughout the rest of their life to live that life of no regrets that you talk about, to live the life that they're capable of living, to make the most of their time here on earth. What would you be saying to that child?
This is a 5-year-old child who has just lost a sister, or just any child?
Just any child.
Wow. Trying to get into the mind of a 5-year-old. There are a couple of things that come to mind, but I think what really comes is their mind is so open. There's so much. Like, I can think for an adult, I'd say things like, you can make mistakes and you probably want people to like you, and that's okay. But it's going to be okay if they don't. But what really comes up for me is I don't know what would stick for a 5-year-old. So the best I have in this moment is, it's okay to make mistakes. Sometimes people will yell at you for it, but it's okay. They might get angry. Doesn't mean that you're wrong. I might say that. Yeah, a child's going to face a lot of you're wrong. There's going to be a lot of that. And I don't believe that's true for any of us. I don't believe there's inherently right or wrong. So this whole I'm wrong thing starts at an early age. And I'd like to give them some peace around, you're never wrong. You might do something that doesn't work for anyone or get someone mad, but there's never anything wrong with you.
Yeah, I like that. And so taking things from the beginning of life to the end of life, and this is the question that I wrap up with everyone, and this is such a good question for what you talk about and the whole ethos of your work. And I'd like you to think ahead, David, to the end of your life, and you have that final day on the deathbed. You're actually talking about it earlier. And when you look back on your life, what legacy do you want to have left during your time on Earth?
That people found permission to be more of themselves, to be more expressing their love, expressing their play, expressing their desires, that people got to be more of themselves and loved more and accepted more of themselves because of my time on the planet. That would be my legacy.
So for people who've been listening to this conversation, they'd like to be a part of that legacy. They like the work that you do and some of the lessons and principles that you've been bringing up today. Where would you direct people to find out a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Thank you. Well, I have an offer.
Oh, nice. We like a good offer.
Yeah, I have an invitation. If you, I do discovery sessions with people who are already successful in a number of areas, and they want to up level and they want to make sure they're getting the most out of their life and work. I do discovery sessions. I don't charge for these because it's how I find the right clients to work with long term, and they're really fun. So you can request one of these. I can't say yes to everybody, but I can say yes to most people who request a session. And there's a really great life assessment as part of it. So even if you decide not to book a time with me on the calendar to get on the phone, you should go through the process and do the life assessment. It takes 5 or 10 minutes and you'll get some really great information about your life. And if you decide you want me to review it with you and we'll create a plan for your life and work, then book me for a session. So the way you do it is go to playforreal.life. That's play for real baby.
And
I feel silly saying that, but it's like
the word for, not the letter for, I presume.
Yeah, the word for, play for real. .life, L-I-F-E, and there's a big button right there that says request a session. You can also subscribe to my podcast, which by the time you're listening to this will be active, and click on podcast. But I'd be honored to help you create a plan for your life and work. And you might want to go, that might be all you need, and off you go and implement the plan, and maybe you'll keep in touch and let me know how you go. If we both feel like coaching can make a big impact, then we can talk about ongoing coaching.
Well, David, I'd just like to say thank you for your time today. I've particularly enjoyed your first word that you've brought into this interview, this idea of truth and telling the truth and telling uncomfortable and unflattering truths, because a lot of people are talking about being authentic nowadays, but as you said, they have an editing to their authentic. They only give the authenticity that they want to give, that makes them look in a good light. I think you haven't been scared to say things that maybe don't put you in an amazing, awesome halo light. And I really appreciate you bringing that into our conversation today. And I think the audience will benefit from hearing someone having the courage to be able to do that. And hopefully it'll give them the courage to do the same and tell their truth in their lives.
Thank you. It's a lifelong process. And my job is to keep nudging people further along the path and nudging myself, because I'm still practicing revealing more and more and more Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed this interview.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it hugely if you could head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the podcast. With your review, please be as honest and detailed as you can be, because with honest and detailed feedback, that helps me to adapt and grow this podcast to most serve you, the listener. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you aren't going to miss any of the future episodes that we've got lined up for you. Until next time, remember that you are the author of your life. You hold the pen, and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. So go out today and write yourself a beautiful story.